Welcome to the Standards Michigan Weekly Focus Teleconference, where the door is open to discuss the week's work, but we also expand upon the underlying philosophy and strategy that guides that work. Today we have the door open from the University of Michigan Duderstadt Center. We schedule these open teleconferences at a time when the work week winds down and when our more reflective discussions do not crowd our production calendars. What we do to write codes and get votes that occurs in the middle part of the week. As Mike Anthony likes to say, writing code and getting votes is what we do to pay the rent. The fundamental currency of what we do is ideas, getting them supported with data onto the agendas of technical and business standards development committees, more or less on an hourly basis. Thus our reference to our core competency, streaming advocacy. In other words, although we support the education industry, we are less in the business of standards education and more in the business of standards advocacy for the public user interest. We always prefer that these Friday teleconferences be more of a discussion than a lecture. We do post almost all of them on our YouTube channel, and we get about 25 views per week. Enough, we think, to meet an obligation to be open, transparent, and accessible, as well as open to challenge to our priorities. This week we have the good fortune and pleasure of working with David Flint, one of the respected voices in the U.S. education facilities industry. He's an employee here at Standards Michigan and a former president and co-founder of Elevator U, the trade association for elevator experts in the U.S. universities. Dave was generous with his time, providing insight into the costs of participating on the ASME A17 committees, but he could not call in today to share his knowledge interactively. Mike and Dave discussed specifics about participation costs yesterday, and that teleconference is linked at the bottom of today's webpage. Mike will be talking around that recording, as he often does, in order to highlight the statements of interest that can help us drive our total cost of ownership through the suite of standards that govern safety and economy of elevators. As a point of reference, the University of Michigan has nearly 700 elevators in operation, 19 of them just in Michigan Stadium alone. So before we get going on the presentation, let me introduce everyone on the call. We have Dennis Johnson with the University of Michigan, as well as our video editor consultant, Mike Toner in LA. Thank you everyone for joining us, and now I will turn the call over to Mike.
Thanks, Christine. Just as campuses are cities within cities, so is the U.S. standards community. You can think of it as a democracy within a democracy in which an open, transparent, and balanced group of materially affected stakeholders discover leading practice that advances our nation's technology agenda. However, like many democracies, participation rates are uneven, and of course the consequences to the electorate. It's noteworthy that in other countries they actually hold their elections on weekends, and those elections occur actually over 2 days. I'm not sure if we could ever get that in the U.S. system, because I think there's probably some partisan agreement that let's put them on a Tuesday in the middle of the week to get the fewest number of voters to the voting booth. So that may not be as nefarious. And when it was originally conceived back when the Constitution was written, it was written around a agrarian type of workday or work week and annual cycle. So we can talk about what participation rates mean in the political democracies. There's some fair correlation with what goes on in standards development when we speak of balance of interests. So that's a different teleconference, as I like to say. So, finding no meaningful and effective advocacy for the education facilities industry across about 25 trade associations that draw from the pool of facility managers, the U of M, we had to invent it, and we did it about 20 years ago, and it's a enterprise within plant operations, which, at least for the total industry, pays off 100,000 to 1 when you consider what the entire industry gets with what we support here. We like to say that we're setting the standards for standards advocacy. In any other industry, 100,000 to 1 payoff would be seized with both hands. But that's not the case with the education facility industry, where the free rider problem still prevails. There's some discussion of the free rider problem on our website, our Ideas Matter website. So if you go and look at About Us, you'll see what we mean by the free rider problem. It's a classical economic problem. The wholesale rejection of the anticipatory intelligence by the U.S. education industry when it fails to participate in standards development is troublesome, and it needs to be dealt with at the highest level. So that's what we're trying to convey with this instrument, with our websites and our discussions. So to understand what it takes to be let's say, a viable and effective standards advocate, we're going to pick actually going to pick 2 standard suites so that the C-suite can see what it costs, and more importantly, if a strategy is established at the highest level, then I think middle managers need to see what it looks like because they would likely be having the subject matters experts report to them. So one other item, I'd like a couple other items before we launch into Dave's talk here. And you'll hear me, this goes on for about a half an hour, but you can see, and I want others to hear from Dave himself, what's really going on in one of the more important committees, and one that's very central to the built environment. It's important to understand that organizations like the United Underwriters Lab, NSF International, NFPA, IAAA, those are organizations that develop standards as the seed corn for their conformity assessment or enforcement enterprises. In other words, standard setting for those organizations is a loss leader that anticipates the payoff and related downstream products and services. We also will remind everyone that in the standard system, all the other stakeholders are getting paid to participate. So here we have this little diagram I picked up on the web. Everybody around here is getting paid to be there. If you go and look at the rosters of standards committees, you'll see all the usual names: General Electric, Underwriters Labs, IEEE, and in some cases the federal government. Those people are getting paid to be there. The only person, generally, the only stakeholder that's not there and getting paid, it could be any one of these, but I'm just saying this person here can hardly afford to get there. So we're trying to plow through that difficulty with some of the specifics you're going to see here today. So let's get started. There's a fair amount of material here, and what we'll do, I think some of my in-house colleagues will be able to hear this, but we will also splice this so that this video recording will be a little bit easier to see. So let's get started. Thanks very much for your time, Dave Flint. Dave has been a colleague of mine for many years, and he's the go-to person here at the University of Michigan and really the state for elevator codes and standards. And so this week's teleconference, our focus teleconference, was specifically about how do you estimate participation costs. Our arguments over many years is that everyone in the standards space, called public safety standards, generally has their participation compensated. There will be statements made that they're done by volunteers, that these are volunteers that actually contribute when people from UL and General Electric, they're all paid staffers, and they're actually not volunteers. And to a large degree, the user is not. The user here now, as we tried to say, that we define ourselves as a user-owner final fiduciary. I don't want to get into that, but it is on our website. So I need to let everyone listen to Dave because he has the wisdom and understands. Certainly, it's understood that elevators are really a central part of land use. They're part of public safety and the usability, the commercial viability of any building. And so it makes sense that we focus quite a bit on elevators for that reason. But in order to have assertive advocacy that's effective, we have to know with whom we'll have to deal, what kind of ideas we can bring to the table, who do we have to sell on our ideas. And that's why you'll see me place here what the committee roster is. And so I think what I'll do is let Dave talk a little bit. I'll ask Dave a question, something like, I could point it, is that what, who are the, who is the public interest? Who's the user of the, of this document, A17, Dave? Who are the user interests? We've gone over this. It's probably worth repeating. And then if you tell me, I will hover over their name, and you can maybe give us some insight into them. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, for user, as I mentioned, J.A. Philippone, Port Authority of New York.
There's two of them here, I see. Okay, they've got the alternates. Okay, they're okay. Now, are they do they do things? I think the Port Authority used to run the World Trade Center, for example. So are they
still do.
Okay? Are they an inspection authority, or do they pay inspectors, or do they pay a fee? Do they actually?
They're an inspection authority and a review authority for anything that's being put in on Port Authority property.
Okay, so that again speaks to my statement that this committee is dominated by enforcement and dominated by manufacturers and insurance. I'd like to know who
dominated by manufacturers, because they're the ones that actually contribute to keep the process going.
Yeah.
Owners and users, such as ourselves and end-use fiduciaries of the property, like at the University of Michigan, have very little input. Yes, they can comment on public comments, but there's also an avenue that's not being explored, and that is, as contributing members, it will reduce the overall cost, and they still have the right to voice their opinion on items that are brought up before individual committees. As you look through the A17 document, in the front portion, you'll see that there are many subcommittees, and those subcommittees are all part of A17. They meet at different times. In the interest of containing cost, University of Michigan has chosen to attend the Code Week, which is A17-1 Code Week, and several of those subcommittees meet during the first couple days of the Code Week meeting, and then attend the standards meeting. And after the standards meeting, they go to A17-7, which is new technology, and A7 or ISO 178, TC 178, and see what input we give to the Europeans in the harmonization effort.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But if we could go back here again and examine this, I want to discriminate between a user who is an enforcement. So an enforcement interest is one who has primarily a public safety objective. And let's just use a large property owner, for example. Let's take, and I don't want to use any political leaders or political candidates that own property, but where would, say, BOMA, the Building Owners and Management Association, where would they be? Because remember, they need safety, but they also need economy. Is there anybody on this list that's voting on behalf of the property owners?
Other than the U.S. Navy, which was Mr. Harity and Mr. Philippone from the Port Authority, there are none on the standards committee that I'm aware of.
Okay, and we just established that our friends from the Port Authority are largely enforcement interests.
Yes.
Okay,
But,
all right. So there really
like
is.
I said, they also do review and purchase. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of municipalities, I imagine, this is the world's most populous city, or maybe not anymore, but they've certainly got their share of tall buildings. And so obviously safety for those tall buildings is important. I don't see a BOMA on here, though. I don't see an IFMA on here. That's what I don't see.
No, but no, you don't.
Yeah, and I see, I
You
see
see,
somebody from Michigan here. Is he is probably
he's
enforcement,
the
right?
chief state elevator inspector for the state of Michigan.
Okay, all right. So what we've established here by looking at this committee, nobody was paying for the bill for both safety, public safety, and safety of the balance sheet. Safety of the balance sheet matters. If you overdo safety, you're not going to have people come to your buildings. I often use the anecdote of the fire people. Fire people don't want to have anything. They'll say, we don't want to see anything that burns in your building. And so the architect says, okay, it's going to all be made of rock. It'll be all made of rock. And he never has enough money for that, and so he just takes his building elsewhere. The owner goes elsewhere. So if you overdo safety, people are not going to come to your buildings, and you're out of business. So
I'd rephrase that, Mike, to say not overdo safety, but make safety the primary objective of the committee.
What about safety of the balance sheet, though? Suppose, and that's where most of our work is trying to understand if we're going to be outvoted. It looks like we're outvoted completely here because I don't see anybody who's, there is no, so effectively there is no owner interest on A17.1.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I want to know. So how much would it cost to get that interest? And that's why, and so here's where our bill comes now. And so this is what we were working on a little bit earlier, and I apologize. Remember, our Friday teleconferences are not supposed to be polished because our primary job is doing stuff, putting words on paper, finding data, discovering things, putting new ideas, and getting them vetted. So we're hoping that the education function is taken up by others. Nevertheless, we hope that the nuts and bolts here is enlightening. So to get a final fiduciary here, for, I'll call it user, owner, well, no, let's call them final fiduciary. Final fiduciary. And we'll identify them as the person who has to pay for both safety and economy. So to get onto that committee, they meet 3 times per year for 5 days. This includes travel, and that's about, so that is, now I might need a little bit of help. If this is the main committee, does this committee have oversight over everything that's done downstream here?
Yes.
Okay. So ideas get through. How are new ideas put through? When these people vote, and they're the only people that have a final vote on it, how do new ideas get up into this area here? And by the way, I believe this is the latest revision.
Subcommittee, the subcommittee is either tasked with answering a inquiry from a user owner or a code authority or a manufacturer saying, what if is the intent of the code this? And the subcommittee makes a ruling on it and then pushes it to the standards committee for final approval. Mm-hmm. If the standards committee doesn't like or doesn't approve, that it goes back to committee for them to work on to intensify and come up with a final answer that's agreeable to the standards committee.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interpretation of a new concept that might be tracking in the latest revision, or there's an application situation out there, and they want to understand. The architect may want some firmer understanding to make sure it conforms to the intent of the committee. So I get that. NFPA does that also. That's not a new idea, though.
But what you have to also understand is that A17.1 is it's the written word. A17.7, which is a performance-based code, allows the entry of new ideas, but they're governed under the A17.1 standard.
ASME A17.7. Okay, so they have a document.
Performance-based code.
Okay.
That's how you get new technology to the market sooner, is going through A17.7.
Well, this just sounds like a revenue stream for conformity assessment here. That's what this is. This says these are the rules. This is what you can bill for. That's what this looks like to me.
Yep.
Or maybe this is just a the bare bones. There's a larger document that that does
So
this.
there is a larger document.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not their general requirements here then. So you said the path of new ideas through this committee comes into new ideas going up to each of the subcommittees, that this group never sees new ideas unless they're sitting on both of them. Is that what it's set up?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it. The subcommittee is forwarded the question from either the standards committee, private individual, ASME, saying clarifications needed. Will this, in your opinion, will this meet the intent of A17.1?
Okay. All right. So that still isn't. Well, it's probably worth talking about another teleconference. How new ideas get driven into this document. First of all, let me clarify that elevator technology clearly is doing rather well, at least in my estimation. I'm sure they could do better, but I would always ask, now that they're doing it so well, can we get it cheaper? And that would be a question I would ask. One question
That's
here.
where A17.7 comes in.
Okay, we'll have to talk a little bit more about that. Right now we're trying to get, we've already established there's nobody paying the final bill on this committee, so I get that. Now, the other thing I wanted to get to, if we could in our available time here, let's look at some of these other parts of this. If you're going to be effective in these spaces, if it's anything like the NEC and telecommunications, you're going to see many of the same people. So many of these same people are going to these other conferences, and so this is not standards development per se, but a lot of the leading lights, the thought leaders of the industry, are probably at these conferences. So it behooves us to be involved in this is the national, and of course there are things happening on the international level. Parts are being developed there, where the field installation and manufacturer shop floor process ends. Very often that's determined at a global level. How much can you possibly make in another country so that you don't have to field install it in the United States? And that may go back, that boundary may be different in different applications, but the larger question often, at least in the globalization, is that how can we make parts interchangeable so that we have as little field installation as possible. So a lot of those conversations are happening here. So now,
Mike, that goes back to the ISO task group, okay, which is moving towards the harmonization with EN 8150 and EN 8120, which will, once harmonized, the part that they use in Germany will be the same part that's used in the U.S. That's the idea, is to get the manufacturers so that it's one part, not 20 for 20 different codes around the world.
And that's a good thing to do. What is it? That's called what do we call it? It's ISO 178. So I think I might have posted something on this, or somebody posted something on. Here we go. Yeah. All right. So, right. So you'd mentioned these, Ian. So this is a kind of a generic statement about how we approach. It turns out when you do this enough that there are certain concepts that come out, and I don't want that. That's not what this is about. I was trying to find the EM 2150 material. Long story short, if you're going to be in this space over here, it is probably not a bad idea for you to be over here. But remembering all the time that the one vote that ASME has in our system is informed by all U.S. stakeholders. And do they actually have the members of the U.S. tag on this one somewhere? I imagine they do.
No.
They don't?
They don't.
Should
you got to
they?
remember, in the U.S. tag, we only have one vote.
I get that, but the U.S. tag must have many members.
They do for different groups. And, part of the A17 Code Week on Thursday, the ISO TC 178 meet, and I attend that, but I'm not a member because I don't want to incur the cost of traveling overseas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're never prohibited from attending those meetings as an observer. I've been that way myself on a couple of them. So, okay, so we've established.
But I still make comments at them.
Sure you can. Sure you can.
Yeah, I do.
So here we have the core committee, and it makes sense if you're going to advocate there that you're going to need to advocate here. There's probably a lot of anticipatory intelligence you get out of this. This is for the education facilities industry. This is a
nonprofits and education.
Yeah. Okay. And this is the National Association of Electrical National
Elevator Contractors.
Association of Elevator Contractors. So these are installation folks, and typically they might be a subcontractor to a larger mechanical contractor, and they meet four or 5 days once per year, including travel plus professional time. So and then of course I think I need to partition this because really ASME is bearing this cost. And really for the user owner, final fiduciary in the education facilities industry to be able to finance this kind of advocacy involves this amount of. So what do we
keep in mind on the U.S. tag, on the ISO 178, the individual member pays their own way. ASME only pays for their secretary. Okay.
You mean this here? You mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean? ASME takes care of the secretary.
The secretary for the tag group is an ASME secretary.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So.
And the other people that are on it are not. Well, they may be representing ASME. They are, like Lou Bialy is chair the ISO tag, and he is a consultant for Otis Elevator Company. So
okay.
Otis picks up his tab.
Okay. Okay. And of course, special consultants matter. Special consultants, you'll see them here. You'll see them here. They'll have a name that looks like a special consultant's name. I'm trying to pick one up here. All right. So technical standards.
Go to Brooks. Okay, it says J.R. Brooks, North Carolina Department of Labor. He no longer holds that position. He's actually a consultant now.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. It's okay. So, then to summarize,
Coker and Company is a consultant.
Yeah.
What may be beneficial for you is for you to go through the list, send me the list separately, and I'll go through and highlight who's who.
Okay, that's fair. Well,
but get the most recent edition, which is the 2013. The 16 will be out in a few short months.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to just get the hour count correct to have an effective voice. As a final fiduciary here. And I don't rule out the possibility that we would maybe collaborate with another owner, like or IFMA or BOMA, on trying to get our insight here and to make sure that we don't, there's not what I'll call regulatory excess or market making. Our system allows for that. And our system also allows for the bartering and what I call leading practice discovery. So going back to our hour count, we want this vote involves roughly 150 to 2 hours per year, not including travel. You've got another week's worth of a conference here. You've got another week's of a conference here. So that's about the scope of it. And what that means in terms of dollars is another discussion. But that tells us what effective advocacy would look like. And another part of this, I believe you said there must be a 5-year commitment, or must be a 3-year commitment.
Yeah, once you join the committee, it's expected that commitment will be there. Like I sit on the QEI committee and A17-4 committee, and Rich had to write a letter saying that he would support me as long as I was a member.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So, and of course, we understand that in order to be really effective, far more, and I'll also say to be effective, you're looking at, I'll say 6 to 12 years.
Yeah, you're probably looking at that.
Yeah, to be effective, 6 to, and of course, remember that all those other folks have been there for a long time also, and
but
usually 6 to 12
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what's helpful. So you have a voice. So you need to, there's always that period where they're going to look at the new guy in the block. It is not clear to me whether ASMA would even allow a final fiduciary on that committee. So, but I did want to get an idea of what it costs. Go ahead.
Yeah, they told me that they didn't see a problem. It may take 2 votes, which would be 2 different meetings, but they would expect me to be on it with no problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. Okay, good. So now, so my point of this, and I'm going back to our agenda for our talk for this Friday, and I'm doing this, everyone, because Dave's not able to call in tomorrow, and we often will do this when we have very important topical material that can't be done on a Friday afternoon. By comparison, my vote on the NEC is we meet 2 times every 3-year revision cycle, usually in December and January. Meetings are usually, I'm going to say they basically nuke out 5 days. I just don't see, I'll just say 5 to 6 days just to be safe, because sometimes you do get stuck on things and it requires you to be there. And of course, to be effective, it takes 6 to 12 years. And both of you and I are fairly effective there now. So I think advocacy in the National Electrical Code is considerably less expensive than advocacy in the ASME suite. And the next time we take up this topic, we're going to go and look at the participation costs of the ICC suite and the ASHRAE suite. They all have different ways of doing it, but what does it cost to get a voice and a vote? So we're not just going after ASME right now, but I thought by comparison it might help enlighten some of the ways these ideas and these codes come into being. So Dave, I've hustled us quite a bit through our pre-record here, and I feel a little guilty about doing it because you're such a knowledgeable person. Are there things that you think we should know about, knowing that our focus is principally on participation costs? Is there anything I might have missed here? And I'll also say to our listeners that we have a number of very enlightening elevator standard teleconferences with Dave. We just did one yesterday, for example, for the state of Michigan. So these will be available for you. But in the interest of trying to keep us on our agenda here, is there anything else you can speak to on the matter of participation costs for the ASME A17 document?
Yeah, there is, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, that's becoming a contributing member. Contributing member allows many people to have a voice in the topic that's being discussed on the individual committees without having to do travel. And it's the cheapest way to get on a committee. Generally, you have to attend one meeting and then apply for a membership as a contributing member. And then after that, you don't have to attend, unlike a member of the committee that's required to attend. And attendance is taken, and your participation is noted, so that when it comes up for re-election, whether or not you're an active participant will determine whether or not you're going to be back on that committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So being a contributing member is a down and dirty way to have a voice, but not always have to attend.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. So I make that here, not able to submit comments. I've noticed that, and I believe I pointed this out here, is that in the ASME system is roughly similar to the ICC in that they don't allow your average bear to vote at the end. And in fact, the ICC, and this has to do with just the economics of trying to get some ideas in one spot and getting the best of them distilled into a code that we all can believe in. They will have staffers, ICC staffers. I'm never shy about saying that in the International Building Code, there is no final vote other than building inspectors, period. There's no vote. At the very end, it's only building inspectors who vote. And we pointed that out to our industry and others, not to be cranky about it, but to say that we think that it might not be a bad idea if the voting blocks were a little bit more balanced. So I'll just leave it at that.
Represented at all.
Yeah, and this is part of our system. Again, as imperfect as it is, it's better than having it coming from the top down and having these documents written by summer interns working in Washington. So is there anything else, Dave?
Oh, that's pretty much it. I mean, you could go on it for individual portions of it for hours, but overall, I think you've met the criteria of what it would cost. And it may be a little generous as far as it may not cost that much, but leaving it in the balance to say that you can expect to spend this is much better than under budgeting and then trying to scramble to find money to go.
Yeah. The big leap that I've taken here is that if you're going to be here at all, you need to be on all of these. This is not the kind of technology where you can isolate yourself, especially for our industry. You need to be involved in these others, I believe.
Most people that join these committees are dedicated to the committee. And they're dedicated to making sure that the voice is heard, voice of reason, that not only promotes the safety but end-use cost. And that's what we have to be concerned with as universities and public institutions, is to make sure that we cover that topic, to make sure that we're not getting a gold-plated elevator. We're getting something that is responsibly, cost responsibility and safety are the topics.
Yeah, the gold. I think we've gotten past the gold-plated elevator. The trouble is that it's the maintenance afterward will tend to make up for in a competitive bidding environment. Usually, a lot of the excesses are shaken out, but then you have the long-term, the effective cost, the total cost of ownership, and that's the part that we have to reckon with. And the maintenance standards really are a reflection of some of the safety performance, the specific performance standards of care that you see in these documents. So we're going to do a part, since you mentioned that, we never have enough time. We've probably taken up our whole half hour, actually. We never have enough to talk about.
We're way past that, Mike.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll post this as a, we'll be posting this as an addenda to what it costs, because we can't make any progress unless we know how much we have to invest to get to recover it and then some. So I'm very grateful for your time, Dave, as always, and we'll probably have this